Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about Donald Trump's election and subsequent proposed tariffs on both Canada and the US for a multitude of reasons. I'll be looking at the impact of that, the history of the relationship, and how some of the philosophers we covered would go about solving this issue and this global conflict. So for some background, NATO is a North Atlantic trade agreement between Canada, US, and Mexico. It's one of the strongest trade agreements in the world, and it's been around for a very long time. In Trump's first presidency in 2016, he looked at renegotiating some of the terms of NATO because of the impacts it had on the US, and he was successful in that. And then following his election, he proposed these massive 25% tariffs on the NATO countries. Trump primarily proposed the tariffs for a couple reasons, primarily to bring industries back to the US that had fled to foreign markets. He did this to, kind of get rid of the financial burden that some of these countries have on the US and the impacts of that. And also because of the current border situation and immigrant situation in the US coming from those countries. Because of all this, he proposed these drastic tariffs that would have generally negative impact on all countries involved. It would destroy Canada and US's economy, but also would deeply impact the American economy a lot. The US gets, I think, 75% of its oil from Canada, as well as most of its lumber. A majority of its produce comes from Mexico. So all of these tariffs will do is just increase the cost of those products, and that will be passed along to the American consumer. So because of this, it might not be the best route. In regards to Trump's actions and how he's carrying himself, I think it's very Machiavellian. I think throughout Trump's presidency, we've seen a lot of instances of him using these tactics in a way to persuade people and present an image of himself and how he wants to carry himself and what he promotes. And whether it's come to fruition or not, that's been a big part of him getting elected, is those promises. It's very common for a lot of politicians to do, but I just see it a lot with him. Also, this was a big show of power for the American president, and a way to kind of impose America's will a little bit. So I think that would have been supported by Machiavelli. But in regards to a solution, I look to John Locke because of his international relations outlooks, as well as his individual outlooks on personal freedoms. John Locke puts a heavy emphasis on individual rights and freedoms, commerce, and a lot of things in that regard. So the idea that these tariffs would increase prices on the average American and kind of impact their life, I think he would want to look a different direction. He would kind of look towards the more free trade side of things, that if things are more available, they'll be cheaper, and that is better for the individual American. As well as his international outlook of being a rationalist. There's heavy emphasis on dialogue and negotiation, which has been successful in the past. So because of that, I think the solution would be a diplomatic one of renegotiating the terms of NATO like they have in the past, instead of imposing these drastic measures that will deeply impact the US, Canada, and Mexico.